Have you ever looked up at the night sky, gazing at the countless stars, and wondered, is this vast universe a chaotic accident, or is there a grand design, a hidden order? We're taught about fundamental constants and laws as undeniable truths: gravity, electromagnetism, the very forces that govern our existence. And then there's our planet Earth. It seems almost tailor-made, a perfect home with every conceivable condition ideal for life to blossom and thrive. But where did this incredible richness and diversity of life truly come from? Are we merely a product of random chance, or is there something more? For centuries, humanity has grappled with these profound questions. From the tiniest bacterium to the most complex human being, the intricate dance of life on Earth sparks an unending debate. Did life spontaneously generate and evolve on its own? Or was there truly an architect, a grand designer, behind the breathtaking natural world we explore today? This isn't just about science. It's about our deepest curiosities, our search for meaning in the cosmos. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please comment what you want to suggest to me. That will be the motivation for me to make videos every day. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the topic. The creator of life. Who created the Earth? For thousands of years, ever since the dawn of systematic inquiry and what we now call science, humanity has been relentless in its quest to answer the fundamental question of life's origin. Some firmly believe in evolution, a slow and gradual process of change over immense spans of time. Others place their faith in religious doctrines, revering ancient texts and spiritual beliefs that speak of divine creation. Still others subscribe to the theory of creationism, positing a direct, intentional act of a higher power. The intellectual battlegrounds of these differing viewpoints have raged for centuries, generating countless arguments and counter-arguments. Yet, amidst this vibrant, often passionate debate, one particular perspective has gained immense traction and wide acceptance within the global scientific community and among the broader public. While it faces its share of challenges and criticisms across various facets and viewpoints, no one can deny its monumental contribution to the advancement of human knowledge over the past few hundred years. I'm talking, of course, about the theory of evolution. The validity, merits, or even contradictions of the theory of evolution are topics we'll delve into later in this video. But for now, a more pressing question demands our attention. Why has the theory of evolution gained such widespread recognition? Why, despite ongoing skepticism and debate, can neither you nor I, nor even the most highly specialized experts completely dismiss it? Beyond its acceptance by the scientific community, the theory of evolution is taught as a mainstream scientific theory in numerous educational systems worldwide, including right here in Vietnam. And it all began with this remarkable young man. Imagine the year 1831. We're looking at the HMS Beagle, a magnificent ship slicing through the vast Pacific Ocean. Its mission: to map the South American coastline and conduct scientific research. But this vessel carries a truly extraordinary passenger, the naturalist Charles Darwin. From the moment he left the shores of England, Darwin was captivated, losing himself in the natural wonders of the equatorial southern regions. It's hard to believe that a man of his privileged background and fortune would dare to abandon the comforts of his homeland, escaping the intellectual conservatism of England to seek a new ideal. Yet, this young man would use the incredible puzzle pieces he collected from around the world to explain the totality of life on this planet. Darwin's core idea: natural selection. At its core, Darwin's theory of evolution, based on natural selection, provides a powerful explanation for the complexity, beauty, intricacy, and sheer diversity of life on Earth. For years, Darwin labored in secrecy, meticulously piecing together disparate evidence, striving with every fiber of his being to prove the hypothesis he had formulated. Darwin's research can truly be regarded as a new marvel of scientific thought. For many years prior, the questions surrounding the origin and diversity of species, or their peculiar geographical distribution, had fueled an unending debate. Suddenly, the idea of evolution emerged, offering a coherent explanation for all these phenomena. The theory of evolution, a hypothesis that unveils the beauty and wonder of nature, but also its surprisingly unforgiving and often brutal reality. Of course, not every groundbreaking idea is immediately embraced by the masses. The knowledge Darwin presented was fiercely challenged and resisted by society at the time. He had to contend with illness, self-doubt, religious opposition, and countless other pains for his revolutionary ideal. It was an act of immense courage that gave him the confidence to declare that this world was shaped by natural forces, not by divine intervention. Darwin understood the profound power his work held, a work that would fundamentally change the world. Should Darwin be celebrated as a great scientist or dismissed as a deluded radical for his theory? Darwin's initial argument about the age of life was, in essence, a mortal blow to the beliefs of the vast majority of people at the time. To verify his claims, we'll proceed step by step. Those who believe in a creator assert that life is very young, and that God created life on Earth only about 10,000 years ago. So when did life truly begin? This ancient, rugged landscape is in Western Australia, a place where we find what are believed to be the oldest fossil traces in the world. These relics will transport us back to the incredible moment when life first sparked into existence. These aren't just ordinary rock formations. They were built by the fossilized remains of countless ancient microbes. Scientists are certain these are the remnants of the earliest life forms because their descendants, organisms called stromatolites, still exist today. But how do we know how old these fossils are? This is how we answer the question. Is life as ancient as Darwin claimed, or was it recently created by God, as creationists believe? It's quite simple, actually. Scientists use a method called radiometric dating, which measures the decay of certain radioactive elements within a sample over time. This allows them to determine the age of samples with an error margin of often less than 1%. When they analyzed the samples from Western Australia, they quickly arrived at an astounding figure, 3.5 billion years old. So it's clear, life began much earlier than the 10,000-year mark proposed by creationists. Darwin was right in his first claim. Next, we must continue to prove Darwin's second assertion. Did life begin with just a few simple organisms and then, over hundreds of millions of years, evolve into millions of different species? Creationists argue that life has not changed over time because the Creator originally made everything as it is now. They believe the world has always had the rich diversity of organisms we see today, ever since its formation. To determine who is right, we need a large-scale examination. The most suitable place for this is the world's fossil record, housed within museums globally. These collections contain millions of fossil specimens, revealing life on Earth at different developmental stages throughout history. As we discussed, we can accurately date each specimen using radiometric methods, so we know when they lived and the order in which they appeared. If Darwin was correct, the oldest fossils would be of simple single-celled organisms like bacteria. And as time progressed, the fossil record would become more diverse, with the appearance of increasingly complex organisms refined in various systems. 3.5 billion years ago, the first organisms were found in stromatolites, the very structures we discovered in Western Australia. The world at this time was incredibly simple, almost devoid of anything else. All we had here was bacteria. No other fossilized life forms of similar age have been found. Life truly began with simple forms, exactly as Darwin hypothesized. 140 million years later, around 3.36 billion years ago, we welcomed new life forms to our earthly home, the first single-celled organisms with nuclei, eukaryotes. 2.1 billion years ago, eukaryotic cells first appeared, the type of cell we see in 99% of organisms today. From this point, it would take another 1.5 billion years for life to truly take off. Welcome to the Cambrian period. These organisms lived approximately 500 million years ago, and they were truly distinct from the basic primordial life forms. They had heads, bellies, and limbs, and their shapes became far more complex, revealing that life had diversified immensely. Clearly, life was not created all at once. It underwent billions of years of development. Darwin's second assertion is entirely accurate. However, what truly solidified Darwin's reputation and encapsulated the essence of his work lies in his third assertion: the explanation for how life became so diverse and complex through the process of natural selection. So what exactly is natural selection? Natural selection is the process that differentiates the survival rates and reproductive success of different genotypes within a population. This leads to the elimination of less adapted phenotypes while enhancing the survival of adapted forms, providing opportunities for these adapted genotypes to contribute to the gene pool of the next generation. To better understand how it works, let's visit a small country in Central America, Panama. As dawn breaks, the rainforest ecosystem here comes alive like never before. As one of the world's richest ecosystems, you cannot deny the fact that life here is diverse beyond imagination. In just a small area of this rainforest, scientists have found 240 plant species, over 4,000 insect species, and nearly 50 mammal species. What created this diversity? And how did countless species emerge to create the marvel we are witnessing? Some believe they are the work of a creator. Darwin, however, declared they were born from nature. The natural world is, in reality, incredibly harsh. Most organisms will perish before they can reproduce. This isn't just true for animals. Even plants cannot escape this cycle. However, some individuals will possess unique traits that give them a higher chance of survival. Perhaps sharper eyes, or the ability to run faster to escape predators. By any means necessary, they must survive long enough to bear offspring and perpetuate their lineage. This is the privilege of the fittest to survive. Over time, small differences in each individual are passed down to the next generation, causing significant change. After many modifications, they will form an entirely new species. This explains why life becomes complex. And according to Darwin, there's another factor that compels species to evolve and adapt, thereby giving rise to new species: their environment. Imagine a herd of brown bears deciding to leave their natural habitat and migrate to the Arctic. In this snowy environment, a lighter coat would help them hunt and hide more easily. And so the bears with lighter fur found food more easily. They survived and reproduced more. Eventually, the coat color of the bear population gradually changed. Step by step, the brown bear population transformed into polar bears with snow-white fur. This transformation process is Darwin's grand and bold idea of natural selection. Today, the theory of evolution has become a widely accepted standard, a mainstream doctrine that we teach to future generations in science classes. And what has made it so widespread and supported is perhaps the ever-increasing evidence we find to strengthen the theory of evolution. Do you find this image familiar? These twisting spirals were first discovered in 1950 by Watson and Crick. DNA, short for deoxyribonucleic acid, is made up of nucleotide units. DNA is an extremely important molecule, not just for humans, but for almost all other organisms. DNA contains genetic material and genes. That's what makes us unique. The development of genetic technology is perhaps the most significant contribution to studies related to evolutionary biology since Darwin's hypothesis was born. The existence of DNA in all living organisms also means that it's possible all species on Earth evolved from a common ancestor. This discovery also helps explain why natural selection, combined with genetic variations, can drive evolution. This process occurs entirely automatically, without any external interference. Furthermore, we are continually discovering similarities between new species and their ancestors. This allows us to clearly see the evolutionary process, as if revealing the intricacy in the formation of species. For example, the structure and morphology of deer, elk, horses, and zebras are relatively similar. It's no surprise to learn that they share a common ancestral origin. Similarly, since flamingos and pelicans share a common origin, it's natural that their morphology, habits, and even their DNA are relatively similar. Now let's think for a moment. Have you ever had wisdom teeth? Yes, those are one of the remaining traces of the evolutionary process in our bodies. These traits are gradually disappearing through evolution because they are no longer suited to current living conditions, and can even be detrimental. Just as adaptive traits don't appear overnight, traits that are no longer necessary also take a very long time to disappear. It's not just wisdom teeth. It's also our appendix and our tailbone. And if you need something more convincing, look at this. Ancient genes are clearly expressed during embryonic development, and there are common characteristics among different species. The early embryos of humans, fish, and some other species once had tails and gills, as well as some other features. Human embryos share similarities with many other animal species, because all species still retain ancient genetic codes. These genes originated when the first cell appeared on Earth. This discovery explains why human embryos, when just a few weeks old, have tails. We have even witnessed evolutionary processes occurring in short periods, documented as valuable records. The most typical example of this is the peppered moth, which evolved due to humanity's industrial revolution. Before, these moths existed in both white and black variations. However, with factories emitting so much pollution, the white moths found it difficult to camouflage themselves. The inevitable result was a significant increase in the black moth population and a drastic decline in the white moth population. Another example is this tiny organism, bacteria. Currently, many types of bacteria are developing drug resistance, causing many doctors and medical professionals headaches and anxiety about a future where there are no ways to resist bacteria. This rapid adaptation is a powerful, real-time demonstration of natural selection at work. Scrutinizing evolution, the origin of life, Pasteur's law. However, to be fair, the theory of evolution still has some gaps that we need to consider. Darwin posited that life appeared a very, very long time ago, but he couldn't explain how it appeared. Louis Pasteur, the famous French scientist and pioneer in microbiology, declared that life must originate from life. Simply put, offspring must have parents. A conscious organism, even the smallest, simplest cell, cannot be created from the random combination of unconscious chemical atoms. This is a law that Pasteur proved experimentally, known as the law of biogenesis. To prove that the concept of spontaneous generation had no scientific basis, an Italian physician named Francesco Redi conducted an experiment. In this experiment, he placed rotting meat in a jar covered with a fine mesh, too small for flies to enter, and lay eggs on the meat. He observed that there were many maggots on the mesh covering the jar, but no maggots on the rotting meat inside the jar. He concluded that maggots came from fly eggs and could not spontaneously generate. However, Redi's experiment still didn't fully prove that the theory of abiogenesis, spontaneous generation from non-living matter, was unscientific. Opponents argued that the mesh was too small to allow air, which they believed was the life-giving factor, to reach the meat, so maggots couldn't spontaneously generate on the meat. It would take another 200 years for the theory of spontaneous generation to be completely refuted by this experiment. The doctrine of spontaneous generation would never recover from the crushing blow of this simple experiment. No known case has ever been able to confirm that organisms can appear without germs, without parents. Pay attention here. We will now look at the experiment Pasteur conducted. First, he poured broth into a glass flask with a long neck. Next, he heated the neck to soften it, then bent the neck into an S shape, like a swan's neck. Next, he boiled the broth in the flask to kill bacteria. The air inside the flask was expelled due to the higher temperature inside. He allowed the flask to cool. When the temperature of the broth dropped to normal, outside air freely entered and exited the flask, but dust, water vapor, and microorganisms from outside could not reach the broth. Instead, they dropped down and adhered to the curved wall of the swan neck. For a year after the experiment, the broth in the flask remained unspoiled. If the swan neck was broken, the broth in the flask became contaminated because microorganisms in the air could easily enter. To completely convince even the most critical person, Louis Pasteur tilted the swan neck flask until the broth touched the curved part of the neck, allowing the attached microorganisms to transfer into the clean broth. As he expected, after some time, the broth teemed with microorganisms. Thus, if Darwin was correct, then the law of biogenesis, one of the most fundamental and robust laws of biology, must be wrong. From the experiment above, you must now know for sure that even the smallest organisms, like microbes or bacteria, cannot spontaneously generate in a sterile environment. The second doubt about the theory of evolution concerns the Cambrian explosion, the sudden appearance of diverse life forms. As we mentioned earlier in the video, before this period, most organisms were simple single-celled individuals. Yet, within a mere 70 to 80 million years, the pace of evolution accelerated with astonishing and mysterious speed. Darwin himself noted in his book On the Origin of Species that the sudden appearance of arthropods in the fossil record during the Cambrian period posed a dilemma for his theory of evolution. If evolution occurs slowly, gradually, over immense periods, then the explosion of life in the Cambrian period completely contradicts that expectation. So, what is the truth? And most importantly, people cannot find the intermediate links for evolution from one species to another. If evolution occurs continuously and gradually, bit by bit, then if species A evolves into species B, there must be intermediate species between A and B. These are called transitional generations or transitional links in the evolutionary chain from A to B. Darwin's own doubts, the scarcity of transitional fossils. However, finding the fossils of these transitional links is harder than finding precious gems. Darwin himself expressed this concern in On the Origin of Species as follows: the number of intermediate varieties, which have formerly existed on the Earth, must be truly enormous. Why, then, is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this, perhaps, is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against my theory. This means that even in Darwin's time, people were actively digging and searching for fossils of transitional generations and found nothing. Over 150 years have passed since On the Origin of Species was published. The effort to find fossils of transitional species largely remains at zero. Simply put, we haven't found a single fossil that clearly possesses characteristics of both an ape and a human, like illustrations of a direct intermediate. The fossils that are often used to fill the gap from ape to human are actually 100% extinct ape or monkey species, or sometimes 100% ancient human fossils. Furthermore, do you remember the bear population I mentioned earlier? As we see, natural selection leads to beneficial variations over millions or billions of years, transforming one species into another. But modern science has never witnessed a single beneficial mutation that creates a new complex feature. On the contrary, most mutations lead to diseases and the degradation of organisms. Natural selection, a seemingly imagined mechanism, would never choose harmful mutations. In other words, natural selection doesn't work, or more precisely, it doesn't always lead to true innovation. Despite enormous efforts in geological digging across the globe, and despite the discovery of many strange animal forms previously unknown, the incredibly large number of missing links in the evolutionary chain remains unfound. The fossil record is almost as discontinuous as when Darwin wrote on the origin of species. Darwin actually dedicated an entire chapter in his book to discussing the scarcity of intermediate fossils. These doubts about the theory of evolution bring us closer to the remaining group, those who believe in the existence of a creator. Even scientists have begun to speak about a creator. Discoveries in cosmology, biology, and philosophy have led many scientists to admit that the universe and life on this planet are part of a grand design. They are perfect, complex, and astonishingly precise. There must have been someone to create and design the immense perfection of this universe. Physicists calculate that for the universe to exist, gravity and other physical laws governing our universe must be adjusted with incredible precision. Otherwise, nothing could exist. For example, if the expansion rate of the universe were even slightly weaker, gravity would pull all matter into a massive collapse. This great scientist once said, "If the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have recollapsed before it ever reached its present size." And the story of life still has much to discuss. We must admit that despite all the questions, Earth remains the only known place where life exists. Life exists on Earth primarily because of 5 key factors. First, there must be a perfect distance from the sun, not too close, not too far, just enough for water to exist in liquid form. The next factor is having a magnetic core that protects the atmosphere from solar winds and life from cosmic radiation. Third, there must be an atmosphere with a greenhouse effect to prevent water from freezing. Fourth, there must be water, the universal solvent of life. And finally, there must be oxygen, allowing us to breathe. However, unlike a simple recipe, these elements must be arranged perfectly, following very strict principles. One must not spoil the other. It can only make the other more complete. Everything must be precise for life to flourish. If Earth didn't have an atmosphere containing oxygen, none of us could breathe. And without oxygen, water cannot exist. Without water, there would be no rain for our crops. But that's not all. The size, temperature, relative distance, and chemical composition of our planet, sun, and moon also need to be precise in every aspect. Did you know our Earth is in a perfect position? This is why humans appeared on Earth, not on any other planet in the universe. It's in the habitable zone, where water exists in liquid form, the basic element for life. The Earth's rotation brings the sun high, shining light down on our planet every morning, and then lowers the sun for night to take its place. If this rotation stopped, half the world would be engulfed in fire, the other half plunged into ice, and as a result, all living organisms would perish. The thing that helps organisms not be scorched by cosmic rays and solar storms also requires many other biological and weather conditions that need to be precise for life to exist. With the question now posed, where did all these masterpieces come from? Was it just an incredibly random coincidence of nature? Newton and Halley's dialogue, the watchmaker analogy. Newton and Halley's dialogue, the watchmaker analogy. Let's turn to the story of these two brilliant scientists. Everyone knows Isaac Newton as one of the most outstanding scientists in history and the father of modern physics. The other, the famous astronomer Edmund Halley, was a close friend of Newton. He is known for calculating the orbit of Halley's comet. Halley was an atheist. One day, he came to visit Newton and saw a model of the solar system made by Newton, which he admired greatly. Halley asked Newton who created this model. Newton replied that this model had no designer or creator. It was simply the result of various materials randomly colliding and forming. A sudden absurdity appeared. Halley retorted that it must have been someone who created it, and furthermore, that person must have been a genius. At this point, Newton patted Halley's shoulder and said, "This model, though very intricate, is truly nothing compared to the real solar system. Even you believe someone created it. So wouldn't the solar system, which is hundreds of millions of times more intricate than this model, have been created by an omnipotent God using his vast wisdom?" The argument was overwhelmingly convincing. From that moment, we gained another scientist who believed in the existence of a creator. If that vast celestial body is also a masterpiece of God, then what about this tiny human body? What does the creator, with such superhuman wisdom, look like? According to the Bible, 2,000 years ago, a man set foot on our planet, a man who claimed to have the answers to life. This was Jesus Christ. 500 years before that, in the East, two other prominent figures, Buddha Siddhartha Gautama and Lao Tzu, also descended to the world to enlighten humanity. The more we delve into ancient religious texts, especially the Bible, the more clearly we realize the implication that God was the one who placed the stars in space, fine-tuned our universe, and created us, not Jesus. In Judaism, Jesus is seen as a messenger of God, a leader sent by God to rescue his people. The Quran of Islam affirms that Jesus was an important prophet of God, who brought the gospel and could perform miracles, but he does not possess supreme divine characteristics. The Tao Te Ching and Buddhist scriptures also do not state that Lao Tzu and Buddha created the world. They were contemporaries of Jesus and seem to have been sent to the world for a mission, rather than to create the universe. So who is the creator? Why have we only heard about them but never truly known them? Throughout the history of human civilization, there are many records and legends related to the birth of the universe and humanity. We have the ancient Babylonian legend of the two gods, Lamu and Lahamu, combining to create humans. Ancient Indian legends claim that gold transformed into the sky and silver into the earth. Then there's the story of Pangu separating heaven and earth, and Nuwa creating humans in ancient Chinese culture. And of course, the story of Jehovah creating heaven, earth, and humans in the Bible. We will probably never know the Creator, just as we cannot explain the strangeness of life on earth. And if we still insist on seeking the truth, is there any clue that can help our small minds harmonize in the most coherent way about how life began? We need a path that doesn't deny evolutionary theory, but also doesn't reject the existence of a creator. In reality, understanding how life began on Earth is much harder than filling in the missing chapters in the history book of the world. This question also leads to other big questions. How rare is life on any given planet? What is the probability of life appearing on any planet? Unfortunately, we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle about the origin of life, but we have something to start with. It is water. Yes, I'm talking about water, the substance that all life we know today depends on. Different life forms can exist thanks to extremely different food sources, but no species can live without water. And as you are watching, we still haven't figured out how water came to cover 2/3 of the world's surface and create the first necessary conditions for life. In other words, we haven't found the origin of water. Scientists believe that water on Earth originated from water-rich minerals melting during our planet's formation, and from icy comets that crashed into Earth billions of years ago and melted. This may be true, or it may not be. But one thing is for sure, we cannot create more water for Earth. We can create a little water in a laboratory, but on a significant large scale, it's completely impossible. High costs, dangerous production processes, making water for mass use becomes impractical. The total amount of water on Earth never changes, but the location and state of water are constantly changing. This is water in liquid form, this is solid, and of course, the remaining form must be gas. Scientists call the process of water changing, states the water cycle. That's when water continuously moves around the world by traveling through the air, down to the ground, and out to the sea. The water cycle begins when water in oceans, lakes, rivers, and swamps evaporates into the atmosphere, that is, into the air around us in the form of water vapor. You are seeing the result of hot air containing water vapor rising high and condensing. It has grown larger, turning a heavy gray color. When it encounters cold air, the water vapor condenses more and more until there is enough to turn back into a liquid state and fall to earth as rain. A portion of the rainwater evaporates immediately and returns to the atmosphere. The rest falls into the sea, becoming part of the cycle again.